The linoleum on the floor of the Hospital St. Louis was scrubbed nearly white, letting shoes squeak like a chorus with each angry step. My brother Julien stood 2 feet away from me, arms crossed, his voice issuing in clipped staccato bursts that echoed off pale walls and bitten-back sighs. Mammon sat on a molded plastic chair further down the corridor, staring into her phone with soft desperation, tumbled grey hair a loose cloud around her face. I had come straight from a shoot on the périphérique, dust on my jeans, backpack still looped over both arms. The blast of hospital air, lemon cleanser and disinfectant strung my nose, but I was too hot inside to notice. "You think they'll take you seriously? A camera is a toy," Julien said, lowering his voice when a nurse walked by, but not enough for me to miss the contempt. "I'm not asking you for anything," I answered, though in some way I knew I was. The sound in the corridor settled between our chests. "I have a project, it's my life." He snorted and looked away, almost missing the tremble in my voice. "Mark, they're not going to let you in these places because you have a camera and a dream. You know what pays for rent, not documentaries." He leaned in. "You think you're Ernest Hemingway with a Sony." This was the oldest argument in our family, as old as Mammon's Tuesday ratatouille and Sunday mass. Since I'd first picked up a borrowed camcorder for a lycée project, kids interviewing neighbors fresh off their night shifts, and kept holding onto it every year, I'd heard the same note of ridicule, childish, foolish, irresponsible. That at 26 I still hadn't gotten it out of my system, as Papa used to say before the cancer made him so quiet, but something in Julien's voice that day was sharper, more urgent, maybe because of Papa. Maybe because the stakes had changed, now that we felt time nipping at our heels, hungry and impatient. "You're wasting everything," he said, "can't you see it?" I glanced past him to the stained glass light, leaking in through heavy hospital windows. Down the hall, Mammon muttered into her phone, calling insurance for the third time since I'd arrived. My hands ached to hold the familiar weight of my camera, so I balled them into fists instead. "Are we done?" I asked, biting the words. "Papa needs us. This isn't the time for your lecture." Julien shrugged and backed away. "You're never going to listen. Everyone here, they look at you and they laugh, you know that, right?" His words latched somewhere deep and angry, but I walked away anyway, carrying their echo with me. "Everyone here, they look at you and they laugh." I thought of my cousins at Christmas, their smirks over wine, friends who'd stopped texting after another documentary screening at a half-empty cinema. The way Paris itself sometimes felt like it was watching, arms folded, waiting for me to fail before closing the door. That night when I sat at Papa's bedside, his hand already cool, I imagined telling him the truth. That his boy had only one skill, looking closely and noticing, always noticing, the secret dances of people moving through this city, but I just squeezed his fingers and stroked his hair. The years grew dense and silent after he died. Madrid, Dakar, Warsaw, project after project funded by scrapping together grants, friends' couches, instant noodles and day-old croissants. Working for television once or twice, always fired for making things too intimate. Back in Paris every 6 months to visit Mammon and Julien, a ghost at family lunch, deflecting questions with news of which bistro was still open past 2 a.m. Each time I'd leave Paris, its sky groaning with rain, the words would come back to me: "This city laughs at you." Old friends got married, bought apartments. Some cousins traveled to New York, returned bragging in clipped English about finance and law. Julien grew into his role. It became a joke, his idiot artist brother in the wind. The family repeated it like a line from a play, yet somewhere that anger became an ember glowing in my belly. Every time Paris rejected me, every time my own brother's laughter washed over me, it only made me more certain I would not belong. I would trespass until I earned my way in, one frame at a time. I filmed everything. Tenements in Saint Denis, secret jazz in Montmartre basements, forgotten faces in La Valette. I listened to stories: the widow on Avenue Parmentier who'd lost her accent, the Syrian boy selling flowers by the Pont Neuf. I came to believe there was a city inside the city, a heartbeat most Parisians ignored because they were too busy looking for their reflection in every shop window. The breakthrough came like a crack in the wall. One thunderous afternoon at the Gare de Lyon, I caught an old woman arguing with the station master in half Algerian French, tracing her way back to Marseille after not seeing her family in 30 years. I asked if I could film. She barked at me until I lowered my camera, and then she told me her name was Amina, and her husband had left her, and her sons were strangers now, but she remembered every scar on their faces as babies. I followed her for 3 days. Her story became Lines Across the City, my first real film shaped out of love and anger and bone-grinding patience. When it premiered at the Cinema Le Grand Action, I had 5 tickets, one for Mammon, who did not come, one for Julien, who did not answer, 50 in the audience, not one of them my family. I drank afterwards with my DP, Claire. She clapped me on the back. One day they will see. Maybe too late, but they will, she toasted to stubborn sons. Those words carried me. Each new film became another line in the sand, daring the world to knock it away. Invitations came, at first cheap and then golden. Screenings in Barcelona, an award in Berlin, dinner with festival directors on the Canal Saint Martin. I ate well finally and bought gnarly little potted plants for my freezing studio in Belleville. 4 years after Papa's death, I got the call. A producer from ARTE offered a real commission, a 4-part miniseries about Paris's invisible city, the stories no one wanted to see. I accepted, trembling with a serenity that startled me. Victory, but not triumphant, just a quiet fullness like eating alone and savoring every bite. I filmed all through winter. I wore layers like armor, my camera slung close. Children playing at Square Leon, a Nigerian baker feeding men before dawn, an old man sweeping the metro steps before sunrise. Each time I'd think, Julien said they will laugh, and I grew gentler, more precise. If this was failure, I decided, let it be failure in 4K. The miniseries aired quietly at first, late on a Sunday night. Just me and Claire, drinking espresso and watching in disbelief. On Monday, I woke to hundreds of emails, long letters, short, fierce congratulations, questions from strangers about their own Paris. The critic from Télérama wrote, "Never has Paris looked as honest, as bruised, nor as beautiful." I held the clipping in my palm so long it wrinkled. 2 weeks later, at the insistence of the producer, I stood on stage at the Théâtre du Châtelet. My arms ached from nerves. A panel of journalists and filmmakers, half of whom I'd idolized, asked questions about construction workers, about the dangers of sentiment. I answered in the strangely even tone I'd learned by watching my own father apologize to his doctors. Careful, measured, calm. After applause, it was over. I walked out into the March air and watched the Seine, pale and silky in morning light. The city didn't look any different, but I felt softer toward its old indifference. The following weekend, I finally returned home for Sunday lunch. Mammon greeted me with her usual distracted air, but a careful pride shone in her eyes. She insisted I have seconds of her poulet roti, and Julien, arriving late as always, nodded at me across the table. No jokes, no arguments, just the brittle civility of siblings grown apart but too tired for war. We ate with the TV murmuring in the corner. Mammon put on the news, half listening as she picked at her plate. Then, without warning, the anchor introduced the evening segment with a smile I'd seen only in dreams. A documentary filmmaker is shining a light on Paris's hidden stories. My name landed in the room like a dropped glass. Julien stiffened. Mammon's fork hovered Medea. The clip played. The baker Hassan laughing by dawn's blue light. The Nigerian children, wet-haired and unself-conscious, screaming around old swings under grey clouds. The old man sweeping, the same at whose feet I'd crouched on December mornings, nearly frozen, asking about the loneliness of empty steps. Static, then my own face, beaming the serenity I'd never achieved in my family's kitchen. Sometimes a city is another parent, cruel, withholding, but patient too. The room was utterly silent. The anchor called it remarkable, moving. Télérama's review flashed at the bottom of the screen. For a full minute, Julien just stared, at the TV, at me, as if both realities could not exist in the same apartment. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. Mammon placed her hand over mine, squeezing clumsily. "That's my son," she said, voice almost breaking. "Look, Julien, that's my son." He laughed, but the sound was hollow, amazed. "You did it. You actually..." I met his eyes, calm and unhurried. "You want to see the rest? I have the longer cuts on my laptop." He nodded, wiping at the corner of his mouth. Yes. "Please." We watched the whole first episode, the film flickering off the walls of the living room where we'd grown up. Outside, the traffic of our quartier murmured, as indifferent as always. For once, the room was peaceful, no sharp words, no mockery, only the slow, honest change of hearts. Afterwards, Julien stood and gripped my shoulder. Not a hug, older brothers don't hug their idiot artist siblings, but something almost gentler. A recognition of a shared scar. "I still don't get it," he said, and his smile was twisted with apology, "but I'm glad you didn't listen to me." We laughed, the sound ringing out with the dusk dust, fresh and unfamiliar in our old house. In the days that followed, neighbors stopped me outside my mother's building, shaking my hand. Cousin Laurent invited me to dinner, asking for advice for his daughter who wanted to draw comic books. Mammon told her friends at Mass. They called to congratulate her, their voices like pebbles tumbling down a well. One afternoon, walking along the canal by République, I saw the city in a new way, the stones in the road, the faces at café tables. I was angry still at how much I'd lost trying to prove myself, but there was also serenity, an inward peace the laughter of others could no longer reach. Paris would never stop laughing at dreamers. This, I understood now, was the secret contract, but sometimes the laughter changed, softened, became applause or at least silence. At night I set up my camera again. The city glowed not with promise but with the patient pleasure of having survived. I filmed shadows gliding up old limestone, children's voices on the courtyard, a woman waiting at a bus stop holding lilies. Every shot a return, every frame another way of saying, yes, you're real, you're seen. I had come back home, and though the city might never love me exactly how I wanted, it could not deny now that I belonged. Not a prodigal son, but something quieter, a witness with a camera instead of a pen, finding peace in what I could finally show, the concrete proof of a ridiculous dream, no longer ridiculous but worn with use and shining.